What is your overall view of the industry? Feel like it's growing and robust?
Well, I would say that the construction industry continues to be a strong performing economic sector, and that's definitely reflected in the levels of employment. The cap and trade program, it generates around $4 billion a year on average. I think one of the big issues that is most impactful right now for California's infrastructure is the conversation around the cap and trade reauthorization.
What is cap and trade? Like, can you explain it?
Cap and trade is offshoot, which was passed by the legislature and signed by Governor Schwarzenegger back in 2006. And this was the authorizing legislation that a lot of the state's climate policy has been derived from.
You guys are looking, obviously, I think, to direct the cap and trade funding into infrastructure.
I think this is also going to be one of the most significant opportunities to invest in California's infrastructure. You know, we haven't built a new water supply in 45 years.
Under the Biden administration, California was a huge winner. And I think at one point I was at a CTC meeting and they were like, yeah, we got like 300 grants in the pipeline.
One of the opportunities that folks are looking at and wondering if we can bring back to the table is the public-private partnership.
Welcome back to Between Two Shovels. On this episode, we have Michael Quigley, the Executive Director of the California Alliance for Jobs. Hope you enjoy this episode. It's fantastic. A lot to learn with Michael and his insight to the construction industry. Welcome to Between Two Shovels, man.
Thank you, Derek. Appreciate the opportunity.
Of course, man. You and I have known each other for a long time. We've been through some battles, you know. It's been fun. And I always learn so much from you, Michael. I always learn so much from you. You're operating at such a higher level. All the things at the state, and I saw you giving some speeches in front of the Capitol recently. Tell me a little bit about what that was. What were you doing?
Well, I think one of the big issues that is most impactful right now for California's infrastructure is, the conversation around the cap and trade reauthorization. And so that's what we had a rally of the coalition, which is called the Climate Safe Infrastructure Coalition. It's made up of business, labor, local government leaders, transit advocates, and even we're joining more like social justice groups. But let me talk a little bit about the California Alliance for Jobs then, as well, right? And I think that's how we find ourselves, operating around this, the cap and trade reauthorization conversation. I think is also, back to the role of like the history of who the Alliance is. And so the Alliance for Jobs recently just had its 30th anniversary.
Nice.
Yeah, and it was founded as a kind of the first in the nation model of labor and management coming together to create an advocacy arm for the union construction industry. And so the members of the Alliance for Jobs are the Associated General Contractors and United Contractors Associations. And then the Northern California Laborers Union, Operating Engineers Local 3, and the Northern California Carpenters Union. So it's very labor management alignment. And what our job is to go out and really advocate for responsible investments in California's infrastructure. And that has been something that I think has set the organization apart from a lot of different sort of political entities in Sacramento, right? Is like we're it's very like transparent who we are, like why we exist and like what we want, right? Like it's but also we have a compelling story about like what the public benefit that comes from these infrastructure investments.
Oh my gosh. And the good jobs it creates.
Exactly.
Right? The jobs that you can afford a mortgage on. That's kind of how I've heard it described, right? Is that like, these are the kind of things where someone can start a family, they can learn a skill, a trade, be in a long-term career with these types of construction labor jobs.
Yeah, that's right. That's one of the best opportunities for, folks with non-traditional education backgrounds or, never found themselves like, on a college path where you can still, have a six-figure job that provides you, pension and health benefits. And, we call them family supporting jobs, right? The sort of things that, help provide entry point into the middle class and like ultimately creates that sort of economic stability that comes from, having the security of a good
Yeah.
job. And so that's why I think these investments, they're measured not just in the how much benefit there is to the families that are, working, that have a family member working on these jobs. Um, Increasingly, there's more and more women actually who are entering into these jobs in part because they are so lucrative as a career opportunity. So that is definitely part of the story of infrastructure,
Yeah. That's
and
awesome.
part of who the Alliance for Jobs is.
Yeah, and you get to, drive some pretty cool machines too. So,
Right.
yeah, I like to take my kids out to, the Tykert rodeos. Shout out to Tykert, and, my kids will be out there driving, D10s or D8s, and
Yes.
excavators, and, man, these things are, like, super sophisticated now. I mean, oh my gosh, it's incredible to see the GPS and the
Sure.
technology, I'm sure it's gonna be a matter of time before, AI is helping them dig some of these
Yeah.
trenches, you know what I mean?
Right, and just the power under those joysticks, like, you can be so precise in the
Right.
application of the machine is, I think part of why they call them operating engineers, right, is they're doing this job that, requires a lot of, technical, precision,
Yes.
right? Like,
100%.
these, like, massive machines. Yeah,
Right, they
so
get things down to, like, a tenth of a foot.
yes, it's like, wow,
Yeah.
yeah.
I remember the first time, Joe actually took me to, Oakland, and I went into, the building where the carpenters are,
Mhm.
and I was so blown away by how beautiful, like, the carpentry was, like,
Yeah.
like, you should expect it, but when you walk in and you see incredible cabinetry and, offices, I was just like, "Man, this is such an incredible skill," and
That's right.
so really, really cool stuff. We were talking a little bit about cap and trade, and I think, what is cap and trade? Like, can you explain it?
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, cap and trade is an offshoot of AB 32, which was passed by the legislature and signed by Governor Schwarzenegger back in 2006. Right. And this was the authorizing legislation that a lot of the state's climate policy has been derived from. And one of the mechanisms of that was the authorization to create this cap and trade program that would essentially freeze the state's carbon emissions, at a percentage of 1990 levels
Mhm.
as like this baseline that would be measured on and going into the future. And then we would cap the emissions of, what they started out with was mostly on like what they called stationary polluters, but essentially like
Power plant.
companies, yeah, power plants,
Right.
cement
Sure.
plants, other
Factories.
industrial sources. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
And so that, they were fixed location. They knew where they were. And then over time, really, this program also and captured all the refineries as a major source
Mhm.
of, a carbon emission. And so the cap and trade program, um, it generates around $4 billion a year,
Wow.
on average. But recently the auctions have been reduced significantly, and there's actually going to be another auction here in August. And so earlier this year, with the Trump administration coming in office, he's directed the Department of Justice, to repeal back, certain laws. And
Yeah.
now he attempted to do something similar during his first term in terms of using federal authority to preempt the state's cap and trade program. But that ended up in court, and authorizing legislation is not, as I said, it's based off of AB 32, which, set forth the parameters to create the program. So it's now up for renewal there's 5 years remaining on the existing program, and so that's up for renewal, by 2030.
Interesting. Okay. I don't think I knew it was up for renewal. It's one of those things about, legislation, and I would say about Washington, nothing's permanent, right? They're like, "Oh, the tax cuts, we're making them permanent." I mean, for 10 years?
Yeah,
Because that's what that means.
that's right.
So,
Yeah.
uh So, did you say it was the Department of Justice that's, going after?
Yeah, I think,
Yeah.
well, he direct the attorney general
Oh, okay.
to go,
Alright.
challenge, I forget but, he and in response to that, whatever Trump said, in response to that, the legislative leadership and the governor, came together and announced that they were gonna, reauthorize the program into the future. And this is part of the reason that the auction revenue had dropped. And so this will be a statement that the, cap and trade program is here to stay,
Good.
and that, it'll be, a long-term,
Mm.
regulation that companies will have to comply with.
Yeah. Um, and you guys are looking, obviously, I think, to direct the cap and trade funding into infrastructure. And the big story out there was the, Trump administration and the high speed rail funding.
Mhm.
Whether that was, a tweet or a letter or whatever they're saying, stop. All right, stop the federal funding. And my understanding, please, jump in here, cap and trade funding is going to backfill some of the funding that was taken away. Is that the
Well,
idea there?
I mean, right now, the 25% of the existing cap and trade revenue goes to the High Speed Rail
Okay.
Authority for the High Speed Rail project. And there's definitely a lot more scrutiny around how that money has, uh, you know, been expended, and where's the state of the progress of the project and things like that. I would say though that, you know, if we look at the vision of high speed rail as part of the infrastructure of our state, I think most people support the concept still of like, it would make sense to have a rail line that linked Northern and Southern California.
Mhm.
It could move people rapidly across the state. Um, I think that it raises a larger question about like, why are we not done with it yet? Or at least, closer to being close finished.
Sure. Yeah.
Um, you know, And I think that that's part of the conversation I think that's starting to happen in Sacramento. But I think you have to separate the project and like what its execution from the value of the project itself. I think the value of the project should still be considered as part of the future of California's infrastructure, and the state has an obligation to the voters who passed the bond,
Yeah.
right? Like the state has an obligation to deliver this project,
Yeah.
and I think that's going to be a big part of the conversation. But I think part of the Climate Safe Infrastructure Coalition, which supports the idea of allocating dedicated revenue to high speed rail, um, we're also looking at other areas of climate resilience infrastructure, including areas like wildfires
Mhm.
and supporting infrastructure around infill and transit oriented development,
Sure.
and then building a lot of other rail capital programs. I think would be really significant for the future of the state if we could build those intercity rail and bookend connectivity projects.
Yeah.
That would really accelerate our infrastructure into the future.
It seems like it's heading that direction, and, I saw the CEQA reform that really
Mm.
targeted, transit-oriented infill, things like that, right? And, high priority infrastructure projects, we everybody talks a lot about, the reservoir up there, Sites
Yes.
Reservoir as one of those that needs to move along quicker and, things like that. So, I'm it's funny, I talked with my cousin lives in the Stockton, Lodi area, and he's like, "Yeah, I totally voted for high-speed rail. I just didn't want it to take 20 years," And we're like, "Yeah, that's" I know a lot of people that, wanted to see it. So, that's a different conversation, and
Well, I'm glad you brought up the Sites Reservoir because, I think this is also gonna be one of the most significant opportunities to, invest in California's infrastructure.
Mhm.
We haven't built a new water supply in 45 years in
Is it
California.
45
Yes,
years?
right? So, we haven't allowed that part of our infrastructure to, um, continue to grow along with the population. And water is actually one of the limiting factors for housing as well,
Oh, sure, of
right? Because
course.
if the
Yeah.
Metropolitan Water District and some of the other major, districts already have a huge number of customers, right?
Mhm.
So, their infrastructure is generally, um, very expensive to upgrade because most of it's underground, and, but it's one of the most significant things we need to look at is, like, increasing, our water infrastructure both locally and then storage through sites. There'll be an opportunity later this year, for the State Water Board to vote on the, take permit for the Sacramento River,
Okay.
and, if this is, approved, which, the hope is that it would be, then, the sites project would be able to break ground before the end of 2026.
That's great. I'm familiar with that area. I mean, I used to go camping up there, East Park Reservoir, Lake Ladoga. I know there's some good elk hunting up there, but it's hard to get that tag.
Oh, yeah.
So, yeah. No, that's huge 'cause, I mean, I feel like they've been talking about that project for a while as well. I didn't
Yeah.
realize it's been 45 years without a new reservoir. I drive up to Oregon, my dad lives up there, and I remember one time stopping at Shasta, and I think, it was President Kennedy that, was doing the groundbreaking for Shasta or something like that. It's I could be fuzzy on those details, but it was part of that generation of the infrastructure building to see a lot of that, storage of the California
Yeah.
Central, water project and things like that.
That's part of the reason that, Sacramentans enjoy such low utility rates, right, under SMUD, is because of the infrastructure that SMUD built during that time
No way.
with all the hydroelectric,
Okay,
sure.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, if you go up from, Union Valley Reservoir and,
yeah.
in that area, there's, several hydroelectric facilities between there and Sacramento.
Thank you, Smud.
And thank you, SMUD, right? Right, like, that investment has paid off. SMUD is the SMUD is one of the best, customer satisfactions of any utility.
How come Smud's not mining Bitcoin? Come on.
Right.
We have cheap
Yeah,
electricity. We should be
just
mining
yeah,
Bitcoin with that stuff, man.
yeah.
Well, good stuff. Well, I hope that I hope all that works itself out. And I saw recently you guys are also in support of the tunnels, right? The Bay Delta tunnels. Is that what we're calling it?
Yeah, there's some interesting movement around that project
Mhm.
as well. The governor has a proposal right now to, create some, environmental streamlining for the permitting process, and that's, I think something that would be beneficial. Part of the problem for that project is, like, it's been reduced in scope than what it was originally, envisioned as 2 tunnels, and now
Amazing.
Gavin, Newsom administration, turned it into, a single tunnel project, and so that has affected the overall finances of it, so
Why would you know why? Like what?
well, obviously, it structurally reduces the amount of water that can be moved through the system,
Well, sure.
right?
Well,
And
why did
so
they reduce it? Do you know? Like,
I mean, that's a
yeah.
that's a question for, Gavin Newsom. Yeah.
Podcast part two.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I know.
But, I think, like, the project is also something that would greatly benefit, I think both the Delta, and Southern California and the Northern California,
Yeah.
because I think what will happen through, the weather patterns of climate change will become more, extreme swings between, deluge and drought,
Mhm.
and I think that's what, we have to build our infrastructure for that capacity.
Sure.
Right? It's not that we would be wasteful with water during the wet years, but, in the last couple years, there's been enough rain that has come through, down the Sacramento River to fill up the site's reservoir over 3 times. So,
Okay.
right, without, like, there's been
All heading out to the ocean.
right,
Yeah.
and so,
Mhm.
and that would help capture water, for the times when, maybe we are going through another drought
Right.
period, so I think that's part of where we need to think about, like, our infrastructure is like a like creating climate resiliency, is gonna require us to shift some of our thinking about environmental priorities, and, like, what is really the priority, to protect the environment is like the fish in the Sacramento River will need water, and that allows the whole, Shasta system on down, to be able to manage its water differently if the sites exist, so
Right.
it would really help, I think, ecosystems up and down the state.
It's a great point, man. It's a great point, man. Yeah. Man, you really have you certainly see a bigger global picture on all the different infrastructure, and I'm kinda curious, what is your overall view of the industry? Feel like it's growing and robust? I mean, how do you I know recently you have advised, construction firms. You have a lot of access to these folks. I mean, what are some of the things you're hearing about the, maybe optimism in the industry? I mean, what are you hearing?
Well, I think one of the opportunities that folks are looking at and wondering if we can bring back to the table is the public-private partnership. I think there's opportunities to create some big projects
Mhm.
in California, using a P3 model. There's a great example of, this of climate policy and infrastructure and traffic relief all coming together on the Highway 37 project,
Oh,
right?
yeah,
In the north end of the bay.
yeah.
The they're working on some sort of phase one fixes, but the longer term vision of that project would be an elevated toll bridge.
Toll facility.
Uh-huh.
Mm,
And that would be, a great way to improve traffic flow
yeah.
and then still allow the estuary, to flow freely between the bay. And, it could
That would
make
be
a
one heck of a
long-term solution.
viaduct, man. That's one heck of a
Yes.
project.
Would it be similar like the YOLO Causeway?
Right, right, right. For
From
miles and miles.
Yeah. Well, YOLO Causeway goes miles.
Yeah.
It's 14 miles, but not all of it would have to be elevated, but
Mhm.
definitely a section would be. And I think there's just another opportunity for that to, you know,
Yeah.
become more climate resilient, better for the environment. And you look at that project, as having again a tremendous impact on, thousands and thousands of daily commuters who are stuck in that project. Structural congestion,
Dude.
right? Like it's,
My
there's
dad drove that for years into the Bay Area,
yeah.
so I'm very familiar with that area.
Yeah. Well, if we could figure out a way to bring some relief, to those people who are using that as a daily commute, and
Mhm.
that would be a great improvement to their quality of life, and give them more time at home with their family, and
Right.
right, less stressful the day to day life, right? So those are some of the long term the benefits of good infrastructure to the user come in many ways, and it's not just in mobility, which is also a primary benefit. Yeah.
Yeah, we all love mobility.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, man, I know that yeah, I've driven that road many times. Skaggs Island out there for sure.
Mhm.
Well, I under the Biden administration, California was a huge winner. I mean, I think at one point I was at a CTC meeting, they were like, "Yeah, we got like 300 grants in the pipeline,"
Mhm.
and the, bipartisan infrastructure law or the, Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, whatever you wanna call
Mhm.
it, major, major boosts into, nationwide
Mhm.
infrastructure. I mean, 30% or more, and I see reports about like nationwide, the number of projects being bid are up, all that kind of stuff. I mean, you kind of deal in the world of like man hours, right? Like workers who are on the job,
Mhm.
putting in the time. Are you seeing big increases in man hours and membership and things
Yeah.
like that?
Well, I would say that, the construction industry continues to be a strong, performing economic sector,
Mhm.
and that's definitely reflected in the levels of employment, and
Yeah.
there are definitely openings for, people who would like to go through an apprenticeship program, and, they're accepting people every day and looking for more,
Yeah.
and so not everyone finds they're ready for a career in construction industry, right? It's not for everyone, but for the type of people who have those values. And I used to work in the construction industry, right? That's part of why I'm honored to be here in this role. Is like I can relate to what that life was like, and wearing a hard hat and a tool belt and going on a job site. And that became part of how I envision like how the infrastructure and how if you had to wait in Highway 37 traffic and you're trying to get to your job, and just how that would just how it just sets your whole day off in a negative direction.
Yeah.
And I think we can make investments in public infrastructure that change people's lives that way for the better.
Who's going to be the next governor?
Oh my god. I don't know. I mean, I'm just kind of like a wait and see. Let's see who else jumps in too,
Yeah.
right? Like
Yeah. Yeah.
I think the field's going to be bigger.
Sure.
Now that
There's no doubt about
now
it.
that Jared
I'm just throwing out rapid fire questions at you.
Yeah.
Did you I have to ask, did you know, CC Myers? Did you have any, I mean, he was
Yeah.
like a lion in the industry there, and I know you still know his son pretty well, right?
Yes,
Yeah,
I
and,
sure do.
um, any stories you have of, he came up very recently with the McCarthy Maze and how he built that and or repaired it in about, 60 days or whatever it was.
Right.
You have any stories you can share?
Well, I had the honor of meeting him, several times.
Mhm.
And he is, definitely one of the most, I think, influential, construction contractors like in California history, right?
Yes, I would say so.
Right, like
Yeah.
he's, he invented a new way of, delivering projects and like,
What does that
making.
mean? What do you mean?
Well, I mean, he essentially, came up with a system like, as I understand it, I'm not like a, a construction engineer or anything, but just where he could continue to work, right? Because he could get the flow of materials to
I
continue,
see, yeah, yeah.
right? Because like when you're building roads and things, and like a lot of this is um,
Log
dictated by, right, how much
right,
concrete,
logistics.
right? The logistics of construction become
Right.
really significant
Got it, yeah, yeah,
on
yeah.
big infrastructure
Right,
projects.
right.
And so he was able to, develop a way where he could have, a really consistent flow of materials.
Yeah.
And that was like, innovative in construction, which I think is something that, other folks have sought to emulate. And I know his son very well. He's actually the co-chair of the Alliance for Jobs board.
There you go.
Shout out to Clinton.
Right, yeah.
And he is, I think, another guy who's like a new leader in for his generation, and has made some innovative steps at his own
Awesome.
company. Maybe he could have him on. Actually, he could
You
talk a little
tell him
bit.
to come on here,
Yeah,
and I
I
will
will.
invite him.
I'll
I'd lo
send him a link to this. Maybe we should close on this as like, yeah, we should get Clinton
Come
on
on
here.
out, Clint, shout
Yeah.
out. We also have to give a shout out to our friend Anthony, who I know is watching, so
Oh, yeah.
we wish you all the best, Anthony.
Yeah,
Like and subscribe.
yeah.
Well, Michael Quigley, Executive Director of the California Alliance for Jobs, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for coming on Between Two Shovels. I'm so happy that you're here and appreciate your time. Thank you so
Yeah.
much.
Thank you, Derek.